Welcome to Paneloids, Comic Books, and More. I am Jeremiah, and I'm joined by our producer, Kyle, as well as our very special guest, Alex Segura. And we're here to discuss his thrilling new novel, Enemy of My Enemy, a Marvel Daredevil crime novel being released in March of this year. Thank you so much for joining us, Alex.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm a fan, so I'm excited to chat about The Man Without Fear and more.
I am quite the fan of Daredevil. I have a tattoo too, but I'm not showing that off right now.
Oh, is it of a cover, a specific cover or a panel or?
It's of my 30th birthday card.
Oh, nice. Who drew it?
Let's see if you can guess, because you did give him credit in the actual credits.
Lee Weeks, right?
Nope.
Good guess, though.
There's your hint.
Oh, Paulo Rivera, yeah. In my defense, you were a little picture, and I am 45 years old.
Also, since you are a Daredevil fan, I do get to show this off.
We also have a drinking game every time he hits the microphone.
Oh, so we're going to be a rough one tonight.
This is a project I've been working on for years.
Oh,
two signatures
cool.
Shy of 50 signatures. I'm stopping at 50. DG signed it twice because 4 issues of his Daredevil run, he was fired and he didn't want to be credited, so they credited to Alan Smithy. So he signed as DG and he signed as Alan Smithy. The first time he ever signed as Alan Smithy.
I was very confused by that as a reader. I was like, what happened to this run? You know, it was right after the McDaniel stuff, and it just, comics. Who are the two you're looking for?
My dream 2 would be David Mazzucchelli and Chris Samney, but I am a realist, so I'm just going with the next 2 opportunities that I get.
You know, Mazzucchelli, like I ran into him once in New York Comic Con, just in Artist Alley, and we chatted for what I thought was a long time. And he was just sitting at his art school table, just hanging out. And I was like, wow, how lucky am I to get to, I was like at least 10 years ago. I'm sure he's not doing that many shows now, but my point is, like, pursue your dreams. Don't give up hope.
Hopefully one day. It's really interesting because he's a ghost on the internet.
Yeah, he doesn't have a footprint, which, goals, right?
So getting back to the book, how did this Daredevil story come together for you?
In terms of like publishing logistics, Hyperion reached out and, obviously I have a background as a crime novelist and sci-fi novelist and also have a lot of experience in comics. And so they were building this Marvel crime line, basically gritty street level superheroes in prose or novel form. And they reached out to me and said, do you want to do Daredevil? I waited a second, but it was an immediate yes, because it's really a blending of my 2 favorite kinds of writing. In terms of the story, just to give you the high concept, the Kingpin is dead. This is not a spoiler. It's in the excerpt that has been posted. And Matt Murdock is really grappling with his feelings because part of him is like, great, this guy that was really a thorn in my side, destroyed my life, ruined my life in many ways, and was my arch nemesis for all this time, is gone. And then it's revealed the main suspect is Frank Castle, the Punisher. But Daredevil discovers something that makes him think that things aren't on the up and up. Something's gone wrong, and he's not convinced that the Punisher is guilty. And so he has to overcome his own inner bias. Part of him is happy that 2 of his biggest enemies are about to eliminate each other in the court. Like Kingpin is dead and the Punisher's about to go to jail forever for his murder. So why intercede? It's the kind of push and pull of Matt's personality as a lawyer, someone who's dedicated to justice and also a hero. He then starts defending Frank Castle and the mystery starts to unfurl and he starts to realize there's a much deeper conspiracy when it comes to why the Kingpin was murdered and who's really behind it. And at the same time, we're seeing a bloody gang war spring into Hell's Kitchen in New York City involving a lot of familiar faces. I wanted to write a Daredevil story that felt very much like a classic Daredevil story. To me, as like a longtime fan, my first exposure to Daredevil was the Dan Chichester Lee Weeks run, which was that initial Fall of the Kingpin stuff, very much the other side of the Born Again coin. And so that pulled me back to Born Again. Daredevil's been so lucky in terms of creators. Like you could rattle off the last 10 writers and artists who work on the book, and they were like all-stars. Obviously, Frank Miller, Mazzucchelli, Denny O'Neil, Ed Brubaker, Brian Bendis. We would take up the whole show just rattling off all the creators that have done some great work. And so what I really wanted to do was kind of play in that space and do the things that I think longtime readers will hopefully enjoy and feel like, okay, this feels like a Daredevil story. And Nocenti's run was a huge influence as well. But by doing that, it meant including a lot of elements that are so identifiable with Daredevil, like the cityscape of Hell's Kitchen, the villains, the supporting cast, Ben Urich's there, Foggy Nelson's there, a lot of other heroes that Daredevil's friends with. But I also didn't want it to feel too crowded. I didn't want it to feel, not as a criticism, it's not Defenders. I wanted it to feel like Daredevil is the star. He's got the supporting cast. He's got these friends friends that help him sometimes. But it's very much a Daredevil story, and all Daredevil stories, for my money, spring from a place of guilt and regret and trying to be better. And I think that's super relatable.
From being Catholic, yes.
Yeah.
So I think you described it best as trying to be a classic, because I really feel like it is an instant classic. And
thank
I
you.
would even put it into the realm of, like, say we're making a nice little TikTok and it's, these are the books to read to get into Daredevil. This is now a number one, because you give a little bit of all of the history, just a little touch of all of it, and cover all of it, and still wrap it all up into a new classic that feels like it could have been written X amount of years ago.
1964.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I mean, I wanted it to feel deeply like a Daredevil book, but I also wanted it to feel new. And so it feels very much in conversation with books like The Kingpin, Born Again, definitely Underboss,
Fall from Grace and all that as well.
Fall from Grace. There's a lot of that in there, a lot of, my Daredevil DNA, the stuff that really spoke to me as a fan. And for me, like, those were the peak Bendis, Brubaker, and I love the newer stuff like Zdarsky, and I just read Stephanie Phillips and Lee Garbutt's first issue, which I loved as well. So Daredevil's been so lucky in terms of creative spaces, but I didn't want this book to feel like, oh, he's taking Daredevil out of Hell's Kitchen, which can be done and can be done really well. Annie Nocenti did it really well in her run, and Mark Waid and Chris and Paulo and that whole lineup of amazing talents. And Jerry Conway took him to the West Coast too, for the first time. But I wanted this to feel very much like a classic Daredevil story with the same push and pull that those stories had on me. So I'm glad it worked for you.
You could pick it up as someone who's probably read every Daredevil comic or never read it, and it's perfect for either kind of fan. I can't compliment it enough.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to do. I wanted to strike that balance for fans like us that have read every Daredevil comic, and I had to read every Daredevil comic, not just for this, but for the Daredevil history book I wrote that came out late last year. For people who are coming to the book from the show, or they heard about the show, or they, whatever other media has pulled them in, or they just see the book and they're like, oh, I wonder what this is about. I wanted them to feel like they are up to speed. Like in those first few chapters, you know who Matt is and what Daredevil is and what his conflict with the Kingpin is. And the rest is kind of, you can collect as you go.
I do want to say that Daredevil Illustrated History book reminds me so much of that Tom DeFalco Spider-Man one that I was obsessed with as a child.
Oh, yeah. I wore that out as a kid. Yeah, where he interviews all the creators.
I can't fit it on my shelf. I have it buried somewhere.
He did an X-Men one, too, that I think I have somewhere in my house. Yeah, that was really good. He talked to Claremont and Fabian and all the artists. Those are great books. I hope they're still in print.
They are not, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a bummer. I think I got mine on eBay, probably.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. There was a fun little story from a podcast that he was on where he was talking one morning. It was him and Larry Hama. They were waiting in Jim Shooter's office, just shooting the shit, and came up with the entire storyline for Peter Porker, Spectacular Spider-Ham.
Oh, that's awesome.
Literally over a cup of coffee.
I heard Tom recently on Todd DeZago's great podcast. It was him, Howard Mackey, Terry Kavanaugh, and Todd, who was obviously part of the Spider Office for a big chunk of time. And they were just talking about the Clone Saga, which was fascinating to me because I was reading comics. I mean, I read comics when I was like a Wednesday warrior, reading that whole thing as it was happening. It was so cool to hear the background because I was always a big Spider-Man guy too.
What is critically panned as one of the worst stories ever, but is actually not bad and
was
the cultural zeitgeist for so many Spider-Man readers.
Super entertaining. Like, it kept me guessing for literally years. Like, I was like, is this really happening? And so, I mean, if your comics can get people that excited, you're doing something right.
Exactly. Speaking of comics, if you had to pick 3 story arcs that helped inspire this Daredevil book, what 3 story arcs would you pick?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I kind of poked at them a little bit. Definitely Born Again and Fall of the Kingpin. I think those 2 are big elements. And if there's a third one, I would say Underboss by Bendis and Malieb. Those are the 3 that kind of come top of mind. I could rattle off like 10 more. Like obviously the Nocenti run, the Brubaker run, the original Miller Jansen stuff obviously is great. But those are the 3 that come to mind because they play with the same pieces. You see characters that are in those runs show up again, particularly Underboss. I think, I love Bendis' stuff and that was what put Bendis on the map for me as a reader. For the first time, I remember picking up that Daredevil arc and just being like, who is this guy? And I mean, obviously Malieb's art is fantastic, but I was just like, wow, they resuscitated the title that was kind of in a little bit of a valley, after the Guardian Devil stuff and the David Mack Quesada stuff, which was all great, just brought it up to another level, which was amazing. But yeah, those are the ones that I think about.
And you've written a lot of great legacy characters. One we're going to talk about a little bit later that I'm really excited for. But of all the legacy characters that you have written, where does Daredevil rank in your pantheon phenomenon of dreaming to do and finally getting to do.
Oh, I never thought I would get to write a Daredevil book of any kind. He was up there, definitely up there. I've written some dialogue for Batman. I've written Peter Parker briefly at the end of Spider Society, and I did a short for Marvel Zombies. So like those itches were all scratched very quickly. But, doing this kind of long form Daredevil story, which to me, if it were a comic, would probably consist of like 2 arcs probably. It's like 12 issues of story are packed in there. It was like kind of beyond my wildest dreams. Probably one of the top characters for me. Oh, wow. There you go. That's awesome.
I got this at Rhode Island this year, and then
Wow.
the Mac.
Wow.
They were right next to each other, so I couldn't not.
Oh, so you're hardcore. You're like a Daredevil lifer.
Number one.
You're starting to see why I moved the interview to make sure he was here.
So I need to hear from you when you get to the end of the book. I want you to message me and tell me if you were surprised by the ending.
Okay, definitely will. I definitely will.
You got farther than me, right, Jeremiah? A little bit?
A little bit. I don't really do novelizations. So the fact that this was offered to us, I was like, okay, let's give this a try. It's been a long time since I've done a novelization.
I'm honored.
As we've been saying, this is like a instant classic. There's obviously inspirations, all this, but as far as continuity goes, is there anything that you tweaked or anything that you were like absolutely needs to stay the same as X, Y, and Z?
I do this with all my comic related novels or short stories, like my Spider-Man Aranya novel, my short stories in the Spider-Verse, and now definitely with Daredevil. I know where it fits into canon. Like in my mind, I know what issue this fits into and how it works and how it plays off into everything. I don't write it that way. Like I write it so someone who's not a Daredevil lifer like three of us can read it and understand it. But if you read it like you're a mega fan, you'll kind of get a sense. It's a little blurry. It's not 1000%, but there's a sense of where it fits in the continuity. So I try to think about it that way. I try to honor what's come before. I treat it almost like it's a new number one. I'm taking everything that happened and I'm recognizing everything that happened, but I'm not beholden to the continuity. But I know where it fits in my mind. I also wanted to present the most, recognizable version of Daredevil. So to me, he's gone through so many changes. He's been a defense attorney, briefly a prosecutor. Now he's a teacher in the new run. He's also been disbarred. He's been on the West Coast in New York. But for me, I needed him to be like Daredevil, the iconic version of Daredevil, but then also recognizing the stuff that happened before. So there's references to, again, not super heavy and it doesn't feel like homework, but there's references to Born Again. There's references to Guardian Devil. There's references to a lot of stuff that Annie Nocenti and Dan Chichester did in their runs, like Fall of the Kingpin and before that, and just the classic origin stuff. And definitely a few references to Man Without Fear, the Miller Romita origin story.
Fun fact about that miniseries, John Romita Jr. did not want to do it. And
yeah,
he said the
wild.
only way he would do it is if Al Williamson would ink him. And he said that Al was going to say no, so he thought he would get out of it scot-free. And it took one call. I'll be like, yeah, I'll do that.
I mean, Al Williamson, just the best of the best. His stuff on Lee Weeks in those Fall of the Kingpin issues is just beautiful. Just stunning.
All of that, all the Man Without Fear, all of his run on Daredevil was inked about 3.5 miles from where I'm sitting right now.
Wow.
He lived in the town literally that shares a zip code with my town.
Did you ever get to meet him?
No, I had an interaction with his grandson. I was working at a comic book store and we had just gotten in a bunch of Treasury books and we had gotten in the Empire Strikes Back Treasury book. And so nice. I had priced it and put it up on the wall. And this little kid was 9 years old. He's like, I have that at home, and pointed up to it. And I was like, oh, it's really cool. I'm glad you like that. He's like, but mine's bigger.
Oh, wow.
What do you mean yours is bigger? And he's like, and it's black and white. Where's your mother?
Yeah. What's your last name?
Yeah. His mom comes around and is like, is your last name Williamson? She's like, yeah.
Wow.
I have to have a conversation with you.
Wow. That's so cool. That's amazing. Yeah. So I've been lucky, doing the research for the history book, but also for this novel. It's been a blessing to be friends with so many people that have worked on this character. Brian Bendis gave it a very glowing blurb, which I felt so grateful for. But Ed Brubaker's a longtime friend, Dan Chichester, Annie. I've known Annie forever, and Mark and Charles and Chip and Stephanie, all these really amazing talents. I felt like I was joining a very VIP club.
Daredevil does have pretty much the slew of all-star creators. There is a lot of characters do not get the recognition that they deserve in terms of the creators that have been on the actual property. Iron Man comes to mind. There are so many, like, I don't want to call them flops, but like Iron Man has a lot more than Daredevil has ever had.
Yeah, I mean, they're also characters that just for me as a reader didn't resonate with me. Like, I was a big street level guy. Like, I loved X-Men, I love Spider-Man, I love Daredevil, and I would pick up Avengers if, this is going to really date me, but if the spinner rack had been already like kind of sucked dry and they're just the Avengers or Force Works and West Coast. I had a lot of West Coast Avengers because if I got there late in the week, I biked over and I was a couple days late. X-Men would be gone, Spider-Man, Daredevil, Batman, all the kind of A-listers. But, you know, I could start to love West Coast Avengers. But yeah, I was never really a big Iron Man guy. I loved Spencer Ackerman's run that just concluded, or a Hulk or Thor guy. But I had a lot of like random issues of all those books because, well, I didn't have a pull list. Daredevil and Spider-Man and the X-Men and Batman were always like top of my list.
I gotta ask, and I'm a little surprised Marvel let you do it.
Okay.
But what was the inspiration to kill off Kingpin? Because so much came from it. Like, it's like you were saying earlier, just seeing Matt struggle with, I kind of am happy. What sparked that?
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, the best plot comes from character. And so my thought when I got the assignment, or when I was kind of pitching for it, I basically asked myself, what is the biggest challenge Matt could face? And not just like a brawl in an alley, but like literally the biggest moral struggle he could have. And I quickly realized it was, what if his greatest villain, I wasn't even on Kingpin yet, but he's the obvious first choice, was killed, and he then had to defend the killer. And then later on you start adding to it. I was like, well, what if it was Kingpin? And then it became, well, what if the suspect was the Punisher? And I didn't think they would let me kill Kingpin, but you know, I figure like, let me shoot my shot. And I think the idea, I'm not trying to blow smoke, but I think the idea is very strong. It's an easy pitch. You're like, Kingpin is dead, Frank Castle's the main suspect, Daredevil thinks something is wrong, and now Matt Murdock is defending Castle in the murder trial of the century. So you get this big epic like true crime extravaganza behind like Frank Castle's supposed murder. And that just felt like it really pulled every lever of a classic Daredevil story. And I honestly, like, I was like, this must have happened before, but I was lucky.
It does feel like that. Like, how did no one think of this? It's so brilliant.
Going in, I was like, this book has to feel like a John Grisham novel with tights. Like, it's got to feel like a superhero story, but it also has to feel like a courtroom drama, and a really compelling one. So when you're not reading Daredevil punching at a bad guy, you're reading Matt Murdock in the courtroom, and that should be as compelling and as interesting. And one thing I really wanted to explore is how messy Matt is, like how he makes these really like complicated choices with his friends, with his romantic partners. Like, he sacrifices a lot of his personal life for what he feels is right. And sometimes it doesn't always work out for him in terms of his personal relationships. And really loved him as a character because he's so complicated. He's so messy. There's a lot of gray area. I mean, he puts on tights. He dresses up like a devil and punches criminals, but is also a lawyer. So, you know, there's a lot of conflict there that it was great to explore.
Kingpin being dead, Punisher's the one who did it, Daredevil's involved, Matt has to defend him. Kind of creates like a skull of sorts, which is a really cool idea in my head in terms of the whole plot point of it all.
Interesting.
So it being a novelization and not an actual comic, a lot of words, a lot of names dropped. Did you sneak any friends or families into this book just via name at all? I'm just curious because I think that's one of the cooler things.
I definitely do it with my personal novels. I'll name someone after something or name a character after someone. I didn't do it really with this book. You know, it's not my toys, you know, but it is always cool when you weave someone into the canon of any like universe, like Star Wars or stuff like that. But I try to tread lightly. Sometimes it can be distracting. Like if you're reading a book and you're like, oh, I've seen that name before. You know what I mean? Like I definitely did it with Secret Identity. The protagonist, her editor is this guy named Rich Berger. And I worked with Karen Berger. I have great admiration for Karen and a lot of respect for her work in the industry. I think she's amazing. And I thought, let me just give her a little nod here. It was cool.
So how does Enemy of My Enemy connect with Jessica Jones' book?
It's Lisa Jewell writing Jessica Jones, then I'm writing Daredevil, and Say Cosby's writing a Luke Cage book. We're all crime writers. I obviously probably have the most comic book background, having written a decent amount of comics. Sean S.A. Cosby is a big comic fan. Lisa wasn't as immersed in the world of comics, but we all got on a Zoom when we announced and kicked it off and basically talked through the broad strokes of each of our books and how they might tie together. So I think Jessica Jones plays, I would say, not a major role in my book. She's around and she shows up more prominently towards the end, but I do tee up Sean's book in a meaningful way. There's a subplot that shows up midway through the book that then gets carried through, that propels Luke Cage on the mission that starts his book. So there's literally a handoff moment at the end. It's not that clear, but you know, there's a moment, it jumps out. The end leads right into Sean's book. And I thought that was kind of cool, but it's not required reading. You don't have to read them all together. If you do read them and like them, you'll see the connective tissue, but they're all definitely standalone pieces.
I was hoping there was a little something like like that. So if you were to write another in this crime collection, my thought would be Punisher, possibly from the other perspective, or
interesting.
just prequel or sequel. Would you be interested in that, or what other characters?
Yeah, 100%. I have an idea for another Daredevil book. I would love the opportunity. I love Moon Knight as well. I'm a big Moon Knight fan. I think he could carry a crime novel on his own. I think he's got so many complexities, and not just literal complexities to his personality, but just as a character, and one of the best visuals in comics. Like, just such a cool costume and look and background, like a lot of elements that feel like Batman, but also very different and compelling. I'd love to do that. Yeah, Daredevil and Moon Knight would probably be my top choices, to do another Daredevil book and then maybe play with the Moon Knight book.
That's funny. Moon Knight was my other choice for you.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I think one of the things that would be really cool about a Moon Knight book, because it's a book and not a comic, would be to change the font when the personality changes.
Yeah, that would be neat. Yeah, and obviously you want to do that with care. I think Jed McKay's done an amazing, his Moon Knight stuff is just such a great service to the character and just done so well. I'm particular to the Doug Mensch Sienkiewicz stuff. That was really what caught me into Moon Knight, but I also read a lot of Terry Kavanagh stuff from the 90s. That's when I was reading. I got to write Moon Knight in a What If Galactus one-shot for Marvel last year, which was a lot of fun, and I really tried to channel that classic, like, Mensch Sienkiewicz era at the beginning.
Sienkiewicz is a god.
A genius, yeah. And one of the nicest guys in comics.
I have a Sienkiewicz, but that's besides the point. I'm not showing off my whole collection.
No, he's like literally the best.
So what is the most challenging part about writing a book based on like a comic character? Like, was it more difficult to take a comic strip and put it into a prose format? Or did you just automatically think prose the whole time?
The project was proposed as a novel. That was what it was going to be. I think the challenge with prose versus a comic is that novels are internal. Like, they're mostly internal. You're literally in Matt Murdock's head for most of the book. There's a couple chapters actually that were a lot of fun to write because I got to hop into another character's head, but you get into the protagonist's thoughts and you're seeing everything as they're thinking it, as opposed to comics, which is captions. You get the monologue captions, but it's about the art. It's about the visual. So really what I need to do as a novelist is create enough of a picture that you as a reader can create the movie in your mind. Like, my contract is with the reader, so I have to give you enough. I try not to over describe. I don't know if you notice that, but in my prose, like, it's very stark, but I'm giving you enough, hopefully, that when you process that, you can see it in your mind. Whereas with comics, I'm doing that with the artist, and then the artist takes it to the reader. The biggest challenge is that we're not in Matt's head all the time in the comics. Like, sometimes we just see what he does and we're like, wow, that was a bad decision, or, oh, interesting choice. Like, I have to kind of validate and explain everything while keeping the pace of the novel. And that's always tricky because sometimes readers aren't used to that voice for those characters, if that makes sense.
Very much so. I do got to say, like, you give the perfect amount of description when it comes to the courtroom. Like, everyone knows what a courtroom looks like. You don't need all the description, but like, I always was in the same box when I got to those points.
I think I get distracted when I'm reading a book and it's overly detailed. Like, for me, my rule is like every detail should count. Like, it should be for a reason. Like, if I'm telling you about why this guy's wearing that t-shirt, it should be for a reason, because that is going to play a part at some point or be a joke or something relevant. And even with like hair color, physical descriptions, like, I give you the broad strokes and I figure that you can create the visual in your mind.
I will compliment you again with that of just pacing. Like, the pacing is very well done. I mean, I read one novel a year. That's kind of my average. And I will dabble with the audiobook just to get it done in a timely fashion. So this is the first in a few years I sat down and actually like read a book.
I'm honored. Yeah, that means a lot.
I've had this book pre-ordered on Audible since it was announced.
We just went over the audiobook narrator.
And then it got pushed back.
You know, it got bumped a little bit for, you know, it's marketing. You know, they want to sync it up closer to the show, which makes sense.
So you mentioned reading Steph and Lee's Daredevil #1. We did get to interview Steph about a month ago and talk about it. We did not get to read it. We're not that special quite yet, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, obviously without spoilers. It's your book and that #1. Like, those are the two big things right now. Like, I don't even care about the show.
That's cool. I'm flattered. I really liked it. I thought it was a really strong, I mean, I loved the earlier run. The Ahmed Cooter stuff was really neat, and it was an interesting twist on the lore. I think you go in immediately and you can tell that Steph knows Daredevil's conflicts. Like, her Matt voice is very accurate, like feels very lived in and mature. And Lee is such a great draftsman, like just one of the best and most underrated artists working in comics. I really like his approach. It feels like a mix between like the Samney Rivera stuff and the more grounded Lee Weeks or Michael Lark gritty stuff, which is a good balance to strike. They could have gone the, I guess, quote unquote, easy route and gone with an identifiable threat, like someone that that people knew, and just like they really subvert that. And they give Matt this really fascinating status quo that, they're probably better about speaking to it than I am, but feels very natural and lived in, and very similar to what JMS did with Peter Parker when he took over the book and made Peter a teacher. And you're like, oh, why hadn't anyone thought of that? This makes perfect sense. But yeah, they changed the status quo in a cool way.
I've been yelling Steph's name for 4 or 5 years, saying like she's going to be everyone's favorite, like just off her like create her own stuff with like Comixology even, and this was just like full circle. I was like, this is the book.
She's great, really talented. And Lee is like, who could ask for a better partner? Like, yeah, I've known Lee a long time. He was doing a lot of Vertigo stuff when I was working at DC in the publicity department, and I was like, this guy's just good, like so good. And it was great to see him really blow up over the last 5-6 years. His covers are great.
I'm glad I got a page before he got insanely expensive.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a small little detour because I got to fanboy out a little bit. I am a huge comics fan. I've always been a comics fan. I also consider myself a very strong comics historian. And you're getting to play with one of the most important comic characters ever and one of the oldest comic characters ever. Let's talk about your Dick Tracy run. How did that happen? How do you feel about that? The fan reaction has been absolutely insanely good about that book. It is considered one of the best books out right now. And it's Dick Tracy.
Yeah, Dick Tracy was up there. I remember it clearly. Like, once upon a time, there was not a comic book movie out every month. There was not like a dozen comic book TV shows on your streaming service. There was no such thing as a streaming service. Like, you had your basic channels. So something like the Burton Batman was a seismic moment. Very similar to how people feel about the Christopher Reeve Superman. It was just like such a big moment. And then after that, the next thing was Dick Tracy. Like, the next big comic book movie was Dick Tracy by, Warren Beatty, Madonna, Al Pacino, like every celebrity you could think of was in that movie. And it was just eye candy. So I remember watching it as a kid like a preteen when it came out. And that pulled me in completely. I read the novelization by Max Allan Collins. I started really reading the comic strips. There were cartoons from the 50s that I started renting from Blockbuster and watching at my house. And my one thought, even then as a kid, I was like, this guy has the best villains, like comparable to Batman, comparable to The Flash, comparable to Spider-Man. And even as a kid, I was like, why did they run them all in the same movie? Like, why did they stretch it out a little bit? You have Big Boy Caprice in the first one, then you have Prune Face in the second one, Flat Top. My hopes to be a movie exec aside, I just realized there were a lot of great characters in there. And I always thought this would make an amazing comic book. Obviously, it was a great comic strip already. So fast forward to, I think, about 10 years ago, I was talking with a friend of mine, and he was like, oh, if there was one character you would love to get the rights to and write, who would it be? And I said immediately Dick Tracy. I was like, I really love that character. I love that world. Obviously, there'd been great Dick Tracy comics. In particular, Kyle Baker and John Francis Moore did an amazing miniseries that's long out of print for Disney, timed to the movie, and it's really beautiful. I have 2 copies just because I know they're not going to make any more of these, and it's just stunning. And there have been great runs since then. Mike Allred and Rich Tommaso and Mike Avon Oeming did a lot of great stuff with that character. But then at that moment, I didn't think there was anyone publishing Dick Tracy comics. So I was at Archie at the time. I was a senior executive at Archie. I don't know. I think I was co-president yet. But I emailed Tribune and I was like, does anyone have the rights to this character? And we worked out a deal. And the idea was for me and Mike Moreci to co-write the series, and we made the announcement, and then there was a snafu with the rights, so we couldn't do it. Long story short is we couldn't do it at Archie, which was a huge disappointment to me. It was business to everyone else, but to me and Mike, it was like, oh man, we really wanted to do this. So a few years later, when I was freelance, we reached out to Tribune again, and the rights were fully available. So we got the rights, Michael, myself, and our creative consultant, Chantel, and then we brought it to Mad Cave and basically explained what we wanted to do, which creatively was, let's do Casino Royale meets LA Confidential meets Dick Tracy. So like all the elements of Dick Tracy are there, except it's not us imitating Chester Gould. We're not trying to do the strip in comic format. We're trying to take the energy and the verve of the strip and bring it to comics and really make it a great comic book. Hopefully, not that there weren't great comics before, but really like take what we loved about the strip and reboot it in a way that didn't cancel anything out, but made it accessible to a new reader and was really like a crime comic. When Michael and I break story, we're like, this is a crime comic that happens to feature a guy in a yellow hat and trench coat who, a lot of people think, oh, it's Batman. He's not Batman. He's really Superman. No. He's like Superman without any powers. He's a really good guy. He wants to do the right thing, and he's just caught up in these really bad situations. And we tried to treat it really organically. Like, what's Tess Trueheart in this world? When is it? And so we nudged it a little bit further up in the timeline timeline. We didn't want to do something where it was like, oh, it's 2025 and Dick Tracy is like here. Like it just felt like it's got to be a period piece and it's got to work in this almost like Batman the Animated Series vibe where it feels a little timeless, but it's very much tied to a certain era. And then we really wanted to be as gritty as possible, but not, gratuitous violence, but definitely like he lives in a world where bad things can happen, people can die, and we've surprised a lot of people too. Like you get to the end of issue 2, people were still email us about it. Like, how could you do that to this character? Like, how could you, like, we thought this character was going to be around for the full run. And then we play with a lot of stuff like the origins and how these characters interact with each other. But I think at its heart, it's very true to the source material. I could go on about this forever, but I feel like we're very true to the Gould strips. They're violent as hell.
Oh my God, they're so violent. They're way more violent than people remember them being.
Yeah, you go back and read those. They were not for the faint of heart. And I think our comic evokes that, but we're not doing an imitation. We're hopefully in conversation. And I think the response has been amazing. I think it's one of those things that for me and Michael and Geraldo, who's really was the perfect choice to take on the series. Like he's got this Frank Miller-esque style with the way he does shading and blacks and noir. He just gives life to these characters in a way I would have never imagined.
I feel as though it is very difficult to reinvent a character of that age in the modern day without ripping anything off. But you guys have walked that line.
Thank you.
Absolutely perfectly.
15, which is the conclusion of our third arc. It's brutal. It's a brutal ending, like a lot of bodies, a lot of conflict. Like Dick Tracy obviously feels very conflicted because his war buddy is revealed to be much more than that. And, we had a lot of fun with that. We got to introduce the Summer Sisters, which is a fairly obscure Dick Tracy villain, twin sisters, gun-toting twin sisters. One of our big things too was fleshing out Pat Patton and Sam Ketchum. Like Pat was his partner from the drop in our series, but we knew, like, everyone was like, where's Sam? Where's Sam? Where's Sam? We were like, just wait, Sam will be there. It was the same thing with the kid. Everyone was like, where's the kid? Where's the kid? And, we have a plan. We know when these guys are going to drop. We didn't want to do it all at once. I love the movie. I think it's a fantastic film. It just got everything in one. I have like 100 years of content in 2 hours. We definitely have plans for more. We've woven Breathless Mahoney. She's a big part of the series now. And we've introduced new characters, which to me is the greatest honor. Like we wanted a nightclub owner that was part of the underworld. And I remember Michael and I were talking, I was like, well, we should add stuff. Like, we're allowed to add characters. Like we shouldn't just use existing villains. And that's kind of what we've done with these holiday specials, which Craig Cermak has been illustrating and doing a really beautiful job with, is we use those specials to kind of add to the mythos. In the Halloween special, there's a villain called Mosaic. And what he does is he imitates the other villains. And that was a lot of fun to play with. And the Valentine's Day special was a lot of fun to play with. And we have a St. Patrick's Day special coming out in March, which will have a new villain who is a recognizable character that hopefully fans will realize who it is by the end.
That's really exciting. Is there any other crime characters that you'd like to do? Like any other?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if the Eisner Estate would like us to do the Spirit, we would be humbled and honored. Michael and I are doing the Phantom 2040 for King Features, and that's a webcomic that they're serializing on their Comics Kingdom platform. And John Amore and George Cambadeas, who I worked with on The Black Ghost forever ago, are the illustrators. That's been a lot of fun. It's like a Blade Runner futuristic take on the Phantom mythos. So we got to play with all the things we like, but also add. So it's a new Phantom, a new world. It's somewhat tied to that cartoon that so many people are fond of, but it's really its own thing. In terms of other pulp heroes, I'd love to do Zorro. I think Zorro is a great character, just visually stunning. And I have written a little bit of Batman, but I would love to do like a Batman miniseries or graphic novel or one shot. That's probably one of my favorite characters, and I think that would be a lot of fun to do.
Or novel. I would take a Batman novel.
Yeah. I mean, John Jackson Miller has done some great novels that are set in the Batman 89 universe. I got to do Green Hornet, which was a thrill. That was really cool for Dynamite. I did Green Hornet Miss Fury, and that was really just awesome. The Shadow as well would be awesome. I think the Shadow is a similar character to Tracy. He's had some great comic book stuff, and I think it's probably ripe for another comic book.
For sure. I agree with that. With Star Wars 10 coming out on February 18th, what can you tease about this final confrontation?
One of the blessings about working on Star Wars, aside from being able to write Star Wars, which is cool in its own way, and adding to that lore, was that I had a lot of runway. And I think the market as it stands now, it's very hard to get a lengthy run going. And so with like the 12 issues of Battle of Jakku, which was, over 4 months, which like 3 issues a month, and then the 10 issues of Star Wars, I got to have this long long-running saga that adds to the end of Return of the Jedi. And so by the last issue, you'll see the culmination of Reyna Oscure's big bad plan and her attempts to derail the New Republic in its earliest days. You'll figure out the final fate of Rin Zanat, who's one of my favorite characters that I co-create with Leonard Kirk at the beginning of Battle of Jakku. And so I tried to tie everything up as best I could, but also leave some things for whoever's next. My goal with any Star Wars comic is to have it evoke the Star Wars that people love, like the films, the TV shows, the novels I love. Like, the Star Wars that speaks to me, I try to channel it through the comics. And so I make sure that every character had their moment. And yeah, I'm really proud of it. I think it's going to be cool to see both of those volumes on the shelf. And some great artists. Like, I've known Phil Noto, probably one of the first pros I got to meet in comics, like while working at Wizard forever ago. And he's like one of the sweetest guys and also one of the just most talented artists. And like, I think he gets underrated in terms of being a draftsman and storyteller, but he's just great. Super talented, super nice, so professional. And it was an honor to work with him, an honor to work with Pete Woods, who I've also known a long time, Luke Ross, like just really great. Ramon Rosales did an issue as well. And so, the cool thing about Star Wars is you're always paired with amazing artists. And when I did Jakku, I got to work with Leonard Kirk, Stefano Raphael, Jethro Morales, and just a murderer's row of talent. And so if you don't like the story, you can at least flip through the pages and it's beautiful. But hopefully you stick around for the story because that was fun to put together.
Spoken like a true writer.
Yeah. I'm the same way as a reader. I have to admit, when I read comics, if the art doesn't speak to me, I'm out. I'm just not interested. I mean, I love good story, but it's a visual medium. And so you really need the artist to carry that load. It's a huge responsibility. It's a lot of work. I can say a crowd storms the castle, I do a double page spread where everyone gets blown up. That's 10 minutes of work on my laptop. For an artist like Phil or anyone else that's really detail oriented, that's like 2 weeks of work. So, they're putting in the blood, sweat, and tears. Not to say the writing is easy. It's a different kind of mental muscle, but it's such an amazing craft and it's a visual medium. So
tell us a little bit about the Forgotten Five.
Oh yeah, it's a Patreon actually, but thank you for asking about the Forgotten Five. The Forgotten Five is basically a story of teenagers in Miami in the early 2000s who are kidnapped. Their powers are activated by this covert organization called the Contingency. And what you discover is that some kind of alien energy crash landed on Earth through the misdeeds of this organization. They accidentally activated this energy, and that power spread over the globe and basically gave people latent abilities. So now the Contingency is seeking them out to activate them and weaponize them. And what we learn in the first issue is that there's one ex-Contingency agent, Polly Napier, who is trying to save these kids and protect them from this organization. The thing about the Forgotten Five is that you get that storyline in the past. You also get to jump forward. You learn that they were forgotten, hence the name, and see where these people are, these five heroes are in the modern day, and realize that something bad is coming in the present timeline and they have to get back together. So it's told in two timelines. It's co-written by me and Sarah Century. You can find out more at patreon.com/The Forgotten Five, all one word. You can become a patron, $5 a month. You get to read every chapter as it's dropped. It's got art from a bunch of great artists like Pat Kennedy, Dean Kotz, who I worked with on The Awakened and some other comic stuff. Pat Kennedy did a lot of stuff at Archie, including Jughead the Hunger. And Craig Cermak, who's done some Dick Tracy, is going to be joining the team. And we're going to have some other artist announcements too. But it's really a fun project that, to me, harkens back to the comics we loved as kids, like books that just were going. Like, they weren't a 5-issue arc. They weren't a one-shot. It was like, you knew Uncanny X-Men was going to be out every month. You knew Legion of Superheroes was going to be out every month, and you would have subplots, you would have narrative detours, you would have stories where they just go to the mall and something happens, and it's like there was some real estate spent on not always the main narrative, and you spend one-off stories with supporting characters and kind of hop around. I wanted that runway. I wanted to have the space to tell a story, and hopefully that fans are buying into it and then can support it. And as we get stuff collected, as we get pages done, we'll crowdsource it and do Kickstarters to do the print editions. But for now, the best way to read it is on Patreon. And just if you like it, become a patron, $5 a month. You get to read all the stuff. We also do a lot of extra stuff. We do a podcast. Sarah and I do a podcast every 6 to 8 weeks where we talk about an issue that inspired the series. We show a lot of sketches and behind the scenes stuff. We do interviews with the creative team, like the letterer, Chaz Pangburn, the colorist, Oliver Mertz, and our editor, Priya Saxena. And, we're trying to bring people along for the ride and look under the hood and see what it takes to put this stuff together. And I think we've been pretty transparent. Sometimes comics comics are hard to make. And so you have to talk about that. But Patreon is probably the best platform for that because it allows people to really just come along for the ride. So if you like books like X-Men, Love and Rockets, Legion of Superheroes, New Teen Titans, like those 80s, 90s books that just kind of felt like they could go on forever and you're really immersing yourself in that universe, you'll dig the Forgotten Five.
Are there any other projects you'd like to hint at, maybe mention, maybe give us an exclusive announcement?
Yeah, I mean, I've got some stuff coming up later this year that I think will be really cool that I can't talk about just yet. Yeah, I wish I could. I mean, I'm finishing up my Star Wars run. Dick Tracy's chugging along. We're about to dive into the next arc. We've got hopefully another holiday special after the St. Patrick's Day special, some more stuff expanding the lore and the universe. And one of the characters I mentioned that I hope to write, I know I am writing. So yeah. We'll see.
I'll take that.
We are in 2026. Do you have any upcoming signings or conventions or shows that you plan on doing this year?
I do. I hope I get them in the right order. I'm doing a show called The Hamptons Whodunit in the Hamptons, New York. That's kind of more of a novel show, but I'll be promoting Daredevil, Enemy of My Enemy. I'll also be going on book tour when Daredevil comes out at the end of March. So I'll be in New York, Miami, Texas, California, and Denver. So I'll kind of be doing like the edge of the country, swooping up. And I'll be at Phoenix Fan Fusion in June and New York Comic Con. And I think that's pretty much it so far. Those are the big ones.
March 24th, Enemy of My Enemy, coming out from Hyperion Avenue. We get Dick Tracy, St. Patrick's Day special. A lot of fun stuff in the pipeline for you. So thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you being here to discuss all things comics, but especially Daredevil. That is a wrap for Paneloids Comic Books and More. Make sure that you pre-order Daredevil, Enemy of My Enemy, Daredevil Marvel Crime Novel in stores March 24th. Thank you so much, Alex.
Oh, thanks you guys. It was a great conversation. I could have kept going, but yeah, thanks for having me.
We could keep you if you want.